Welcome, listeners. You are now joining into The Narrative with Cartier, a show where we explore the narratives of your life, where we hone in on the thing that most influences you, that determines your beginning, your middle, and your end. And so I ask the question, is it your wife? Is it your wife that writes your narrative? Is she the biggest influence in your life? Your loving wife or unloving wife? Maybe you ended up getting a divorce, or maybe you're still married and together. Is it your wife that writes your narrative? And so with that, I ask, is it your husband? Your hubby? Is it your hubby that writes your narrative? That is the biggest influence in your life? Or is it your children? Maybe you've dedicated your whole life to your children, making sure they had the things that you didn't have, maybe making sure that they had a better life than yourself. Maybe it is your children that write your narrative. Is it your girlfriend? Don't know if you just met her. Don't know if you guys have been together for days or months or years. But is it your girlfriend that writes your narrative? Or maybe it's your boyfriend. Maybe it's your boyfriend that writes your narrative. Maybe you didn't think it would turn out that way, but maybe your boyfriend has ended up being the biggest influence in your life and writes your narrative. Or maybe it's your fiance. Your fiance that is planning your wedding and in turn planning the events of the rest of your life. But you just don't know it yet. Maybe it's your fiance. Maybe it's your fiance who will in turn determine the course and the events and the circumstances of your future. Maybe it's your fiance that is your narrative. Maybe it is your father. Your father who you played catch with and played football with, tossed the football, who told you those tips and gave you advice about life, taught you how to be a hard worker, told you the pitfalls and the traps to avoid, taught you how to manage your money, and was there when you needed him most. Or maybe he wasn't there at all. And so maybe he wasn't there when you needed him most, and yet ended up being the thing that defines your narrative, that writes your narrative. Perhaps it's your mother. Maybe she was a single mother, or maybe she wasn't. But maybe your mother, the mothers of the world, maybe your mother had the biggest impact in your life, and maybe your mother writes your narrative. Maybe it was the things she said, maybe it was the things she did. And maybe those are the things that write your narrative. Or maybe it's your siblings. Maybe it's your brother who was always there when you needed him. Maybe your sister who was always there when you needed her. Maybe it's more than one sibling. But is it your siblings that write your narrative? Is it your grandmother? Maybe it's your grandmother that writes your narrative. Maybe you spent summers with her. Maybe she raised you. And maybe you loved her most of all. Or maybe you didn't love her. And maybe she was a horrible grandmother to you, you know? But is it her that writes your narrative? Or maybe it's your grandfather. Maybe a grandfather who you went fishing with, who gave you good advice, or maybe bad advice, who talked about the wars, maybe World War II, the Korean War. Maybe it's your grandfather and you sat there and you listened. You were fascinated by the things he said. Maybe the things he said caused you to join the Army, the Air Force, the Marines. Maybe the things he said caused you to join the military or otherwise, you know? Maybe it was your grandfather who wrote your narrative, who writes your narrative. Or maybe it was your past loved one. Maybe you lost them a day, a week, a year. Maybe your past loved one is the one that writes your narrative. Or maybe you lost them some time ago. But maybe they're the ones that write your narrative. Is it your political affiliation? Maybe you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent or a libertarian. Maybe you're center. Maybe you're left, you're right. Maybe you're all of the above. Maybe you're confused. Maybe you just don't know what you are. Maybe they all sound interesting to you. Maybe a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Or maybe it's your political affiliation that writes your narrative. Maybe you wave the flag and you hold the standard and you stick to those views, no matter what they may be, and you keep to the party line and you don't deter. And so maybe that is what writes your narrative. Or maybe it is your economic outlook. It's a wild roller coaster out there these days. Maybe it's your economic outlook that writes your narrative. Maybe you have a sobering outlook, or maybe you have a risk-taking outlook. Maybe you're just savvy about those things. A broker, hedge fund manager. And you give it your all, and maybe that is what writes your narrative. Maybe your belief in the markets. Maybe your belief in their instabilities, or maybe your belief in their stabilities. Maybe that is what writes your narrative. Or maybe it is your religious outlook. Maybe it's your religion. Maybe you have maybe you are multiple denominations. Or maybe you have a singular denomination. Maybe you don't have any denomination. Maybe you take a sideline approach to a religious outlook. Or maybe you hold fast to your religious outlook. And maybe that is what writes your narrative. And maybe you don't have a religious outlook, but maybe you consider yourself to have a spiritual outlook. Maybe you do a little astral projection or think about the spiritual realm and try to communicate with the spiritual realm and whatever have you. Maybe it is your spiritual outlook that writes your narrative. Is it your job? Maybe it's your job that writes your narrative. Maybe you give it your all. Maybe you're worried about losing it. Maybe you're joyful of gaining it, gaining a job. So is it your job that writes your narrative? Or maybe it's your career. Maybe you maybe you dotted all your I's and crossed your T's, and now you finally have achieved that career that you wanted. And maybe now you're concerned about losing it, or maybe it's going exactly the way you wanted it to go. You put a lot into it and it's giving you back. Or maybe you put a lot into it and it's not giving you back anything. Regardless, perhaps it's your career that writes your narrative. Or maybe it's your employer. Maybe you finally began working or have been working with a Fortune 500 company and consider it the grandest thing. Maybe you have that executive position and it's exactly what you want. Maybe that means everything. And maybe that is what writes your narrative. Or maybe it's your coworkers, being part of the team. Research and development. Maybe whatever department you're working for or with. Maybe your coworkers, what they say, what they do, how they feel about what you're doing. Maybe that writes your narrative. Or maybe it's just your friends. Maybe the friends you grew up with since childhood, or the friends you met in high school or college. Maybe the friends you met in the fraternity. Maybe the friends you met later on. Or maybe it's been your lifelong friend. Are they the ones that write your narrative? Or maybe it's your academic peers. Maybe you feel they're a little too judgmental. Maybe you feel that they're not judgmental enough. But maybe what they think and what they say means most of all. Is it your need for social acceptance? Maybe it's your need for social acceptance that writes your narrative. Maybe you do everything that you feel you need to do. Maybe you do everything you need to do in order to maintain that social acceptance, regardless of the cost. Or maybe you don't consider there's any cost. Or maybe it's the need to be socially accepted that writes your narrative. Or maybe it is your need for antisocial expression that writes your narrative. Maybe you feel that you need to be an outcast or pariah. Maybe you need to feel the need to stand against the grain, to take a stand. Maybe that is what writes your narrative. Is it your wealth that writes your narrative? And many people say that money makes the world go round, and some people don't feel that at all. But maybe it is your wealth that writes your narrative. Maybe you feel as long as you have it, that the beginning, the end, the middle of your story will be told. Or maybe it's your poverty that writes your narrative. Maybe it's the way that you have lived generationally, multi-generationally, on a certain economic level that is considered poverty. Maybe that's what writes your narrative. Maybe you feel that that is what defines you. Maybe you feel that that's keeping it real, or maybe you feel that that always reminds you of where you come from. In any case, maybe it is your poverty that writes your narrative. Or perhaps it's your economic bracket. Maybe you've achieved a certain level of economic status, and you've been working hard for it, or maybe you lost it. Maybe you lost the position in the economic bracket that you most desired. Whatever the case may be. Is that the thing that most influences you? Is that the thing that is writing the beginning, the middle, and the end of your story? Is that what is writing your narrative? Is that what writes your narrative? Or maybe it's the check-to-check cycle. Is the check-to-check cycle writing your narrative? Maybe you don't feel it's a box at all. Maybe you feel that that's exactly the way it should be. Or maybe you feel it's a box. But yet it is writing your narrative. Or maybe it is the ubiquitous concept of social class. Upper class, middle class, lower class, and maybe it is your need for upward mobility that is writing your narrative, that is driving you, and that is writing your narrative and telling your story. Or maybe it is your associations. Maybe you've joined associations based on your professions. Maybe you've joined associations for other reasons. And the need to adhere to the policies and the principles of those associations, and the need to remain in good measure with those associations. Maybe that is what is writing your narrative. Or is it your vows and obligations that you have made in your life that are writing your narrative? Sticking to them, or not being able to stick to them. Maybe that is what is writing your narrative. Is it your need to have a voice that is writing your narrative? A lot of people want to be heard. It doesn't mean everybody has something to say, but a lot of people want to be heard. And whether or not they have something to say, that is, that's relative. But maybe it's a need to have a voice that is your narrative. Or maybe it's a need to be silent and not be heard. Maybe that's what's writing your narrative. as you go out of your way to keep your silence, to keep your peace. Maybe it's your need to cause a stir. Maybe you want to be bombastic and boisterous. Maybe you want to cause a ruckus. Maybe you want to go out and protest or something. Maybe that is what is writing your narrative. Or maybe it is your need to remain invisible. There's some people who want to be off the grid, you know. There's some people who don't want to be noticed, who want to remain invisible. And I'm not saying being off the grid is being invisible. I was using it as a metaphor, pretty much. But maybe not being involved is what some people want most of all. And maybe because of their actions and their decisions, in order to achieve that, maybe that is writing their narrative. Or maybe it's your educational level. Maybe you're proud of your educational level. Maybe you're not so proud of your educational level. Maybe you've obtained your bachelor's, your master's, and your PhDs. And doing so has had a profound effect on you. And maybe that is what is writing your narrative. Or maybe it's the lack thereof. Maybe you are working on your degrees, or maybe you want your degrees, or maybe the fact that you never obtained your degrees or your degree, maybe that is what is writing your narrative. Is it your inspiration? Were you inspired by something? A picture, a painting, a song, an image? Were you inspired by something? And from there on out, it began writing your narrative. And you're caught in the throes of it, in the clutches of it, and it is writing your narrative. Maybe it is that inspiration, that muse, that is writing your narrative. Or maybe it is your aspirations. Maybe you're a goal setter, and you've set goals for yourself, and you are setting about reaching those goals, and maybe that is what is writing your narrative. Is it that subconscious ideal that is writing your narrative? Something that exists in your mind, something that you can't quite place, something that you are not even too aware of or too sure of, and maybe that is writing your narrative. Or maybe it is your conscious ideal that is writing your narrative. Maybe it is something at the forefront of your thought, something that you think about every single day. 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Maybe that is what writes your narrative. Is it your desire for a thing? Is it your desire for many things? Is it your desire that is writing your narrative? Is it your wants? Is it your wants that are writing your narrative? Or is it your needs? Your need and your needs that are writing your narrative. Maybe it is not even, you haven't even reached the stage of want. Maybe it is just the fact that you need something. And maybe that is what is writing your narrative. What forces and influences most shape the direction of your life? That is what the narrative is about. What forces and influences continue to shape your narrative? Is it a philosophical school or a metaphysical school? Was it a book? Did you run across a book in a out-of-the-way bookstore? Or in a popular bookstore? Something that you weren't even looking for. You were looking for something else. And yet you found it. It might have been self-motivational. It might have been spiritual. It might have been amusing, entertaining. It might have been a biography, a work of fiction, a work of nonfiction. But for some reason, that book had the greatest of impacts upon you, and from then on out, it began to write your narrative. Maybe it was a writer. Maybe you ran across a writer, maybe in an article or an interview, in something they wrote or something they said. Maybe that's what it was. Maybe that's what's writing your narrative. Or maybe it was a teacher. Maybe it was a professor. Maybe it was a math teacher, a high school teacher, an elementary school teacher. Maybe it was a teacher. And what you learned from that teacher, what experiences you had with that teacher, maybe you believe that teacher was the greatest teacher in the world and it had the most profound effect on your life. Maybe it was that teacher from then on out that began to write your narrative. And maybe that teacher still writes your narrative. Or maybe it was an instructor. Maybe it was a martial arts instructor or fitness instructor. You changed your diet. You lost the weight. You changed the diet, you gained the weight back. Then you lost it again. But yet maybe it was that instructor that changed your life. And in that life-changing moment, began to write your narrative. Or maybe it was something someone Riley said, commonly said, off the top of their head. But when you heard it, it was more than common. And it was something maybe you had to hear when you needed to hear it. And maybe that's what writes your narrative. Or perhaps it was the last words that someone said to you. It was the last thing that someone said to you before they left and you never saw them again. Or maybe it happened at their bedside. Maybe it was the last thing they said right before they took their last breath. Is that what writes your narrative? As I think about this show, the narrative, and all the things I'm hoping to explore, and all the people I'm hoping to speak to as they share their narratives with you and with me, I think about it and I ask myself, why me? Why the show? What made me think about it? And I look about the world and I ask myself that question and I wondered, why not? Why not explore the answer? And in the answers that could be gleaned from exploring people's narratives. On this show, I would like to explore the narratives, the core streams of meaning and the stories in people's lives. Perhaps in an Aristotelian, a Freytigian sort of fashion, finding the dramatic arc in people's lives, the things that lead to their beginnings, their middle, and their ends. The beginning, following through the middle, and finally the apocalypse, or the revelation, the end. The denouement. Perhaps you'll join me as we write the narrative together. Thank you for joining me in this first show of the narrative, which I call Chapter 1. I hope you continue to join me.